So we have a bunch of people coming in right now. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us on your evening on a weeknight. We know you all have a busy life, so we're seeing some familiar faces come in. Thank you so much for joining us, and some new names, which it's nice to meet you. We're going to do a small introduction in a little bit here. I'll give people one more minute to come in, and then hopefully we can get started. Okay, everybody, it looks like we're a pretty full house tonight. So thank you so much again for coming out. If you missed my first, thank you. We're going to get started. Tonight's a really important conversation. And this past week, I think everyone's had a little more time to reflect on why it's really important to consider your estate planning and why you want to have say in that. So we are really excited to see a bunch of people we know and who are currently engaged in this process, in the process of reviewing older documents and plans, and those new faces that we don't know anything about yet, but we're really excited to have you. So some important information tonight. This is not our advice to you. So this is just information. We hope to spur some conversations at home and within your own families that lead to really great plans for you. If you want legal and tax advice, we have some professionals who have joined us so generously this evening, and we will introduce them to you in a little bit here. And we really are excited to take this time to be with you. So some housekeeping tips. If you are joining us as an attendee, your mic is muted. And you are also not able to share your video with us. That is intentional, just to protect people's privacy and to make sure that we can stay on time tonight. We welcome you to book meetings with the professionals that we have joining us tonight, as well as ourselves, if you ever want to dive deeper into your own situation. We also have the chat feature enabled for you tonight. We would love you to tell us why you are here. The webinar is being recorded, and that is why we've also disabled mics and cameras, unfortunately. So hopefully we can see. Okay, so everyone is saying everything. Sorry, there were some sound issues, but I think we've got them sorted. Hopefully, if you have a chat or a question, please put it in the chat. We will get to all of it. If we don't get to it in the webinar tonight, we will address your concerns with you separately in a follow-up email. Okay. So why we're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about who Scott and I and Holden and Taylor team are. We're also going to meet Dr. Tom Deans, who's the author of this fantastic book, Willing Wisdom. If you have a copy already, you'll know it's a really fun read. It really drives home a good point in a lighter way than some other professionals have done in the past. Scott's going to have a conversation with Dr. Tom that I think we can all learn from. And we're going to introduce to you our network of professionals and give you some opportunities to take advantage of some cool tools that we have available at the end here. So we are here because we care deeply about you understanding the basics of your estate planning. We want to help you learn why you might want to engage your family and those close relationships in conversations about your plans, and also increase your confidence so that you can have those conversations on the regular as a family. We notice that people are starting to do that, but it's still rare that people are having them regularly. How estate planning evolves also aging and long-term care. We are living a lot longer now, and we want to make sure that everyone can have access to the things that they need during the time that they need the most. So, and we're going to encourage you to also get started now. That's really important. We don't always know what we're up to, so hopefully we can, make progress. We're going to introduce ourselves because there's a few new names here. So Scott and I are Holden and Taylor. So it's Scott Holden, I'm Crystal Taylor. We purchased this firm from Scott's dad, Dennis, and we have evolved it into a team. We have multiple staff supporting our plan for helping Canadians see great financial futures, having strong plans, and when the worst happens, we are hopeful that everyone's there for each other in a way that's meaningful because they're not distracted by some of the things that need to happen. So Scott has many years of experience with the carriers. He's very educated. He does hold his CFP designation, which is very important. And I'm here to facilitate kind of the back office, family planning, doing a lot of meetings to find out who people are and what's really important to them. So we're going to take it to an introduction for the main event. So we're going to introduce to you Tom, and Tom is here tonight. It's very generous. We really, really appreciate you being here, Tom. Tom is the author of Every Family's Business. He is the top selling New York Times, I'm sorry, I have like a little small thing here, sorry. He's the best-selling book, family business book of all time. And he is one of the top 10 books on business owners that everybody should read, really. He's sold more than 1 million copies, and he has more than 100 countries. It's sold in more than 100 countries. The book provides the framework for the public lectures and seminars that he delivers, and he has delivered more than 1,000 speeches in 25 countries. His long-awaited sequel, Willing Wisdom, Why We're Here Tonight, was released to critical acclaim and is already an international bestseller. This book has already inspired and entertained a new digital tool called Willing Wisdom Index, which we are going to share with you later tonight. This is the ultimate estate planning checklist. So we really encourage you to take advantage of that tonight or next week. We're going to send that out to you for attending. So both of Tom's books deal with the intergenerational transition of family wealth. This is a really big deal. Like his books, his talks are an unconventional and contrarian. So you'll really enjoy this. I really do believe you will. Previously, he was the CEO of a large Canadian multinational family business, has worked in banking and in government relations, and has been the president of a railway. Tom has been featured in numerous magazines and journals, including Profit, Money Sense, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. A frequent guest on CNBC, Moneyline, and BNN, Tom is highly sought after. For his public speaking on succession planning and wealth management, as well as philanthropic giving, which we can get into, that's the fun part. With his family selling businesses for more than $100 million, prepare to unlearn everything you thought you knew. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope that we can get a lot out of this tonight, and please don't withhold your questions from the chat.
Hey, Crystal, can you go to the previous page just for a second?
Sorry, which one?
For a bit of a loop. Just the previous one.
No, I can't. Sorry.
Oh, I like that picture of me versus what we're seeing over here. I don't even know who that guy. Can't even remember who that guy was.
You want this one? Sorry.
There you go. Look at that. Oh, look at how young I look there. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I picked a good picture.
I've had the pleasure, Crystal and I both have had the pleasure of hearing Dr. Tom Dean speak on more than one occasion, and I always walk away from something, and it's great. We get all these really cool industry events and industry people we get to speak to in conferences and stuff, from a continuing ed piece, and I really wanted to try to extend what Dr. Dean's there has to say to the public. A lot of times he's speaking to industry professionals, he's speaking to estate lawyers, he's speaking to financial advisors. And I really think, the message needs to get out to the public. He's written an amazing book. It's not your typical dry, you need a will, wag your finger thing. And that's kind of what I wanted to generate for, the people that we know. Crystal and I are one of the biggest problems we see in financial planning and estate planning is the fact that people don't have these estate documents in place. They don't have living documents, and they don't have, wills. And so it's a really important thing for us from a perspective of just trying to get people to complete them. They're not that difficult, especially once you put a process in place, to visit that and revisit it. And that's really what I want to get into with Dr. Deans here today. So the title of today's webinar is, and you've got your mic off there, Dr. Deans. The title of today's webinar is Building Smart Estate Plans. Could you give us a brief overview of estate planning today?
It's a great lead-off question because and I don't want to give you a really quick answer. It's in pretty bad shape. We are today in Canada, $205 million was inherited. That's $205 million today. Tomorrow, and every day for the next 10 years. It's roughly $755 billion. And that's conservative. Some estimates suggest that we're going to see a tsunami of wealth. Upwards of $1 trillion will transition from a senior generation to the next generation over the next 10 years. And the reality is the vast majority of Canadians are not prepared. We know that roughly 12.5 million Canadian adults are missing the most important document in an estate plan, which is a will. And we know that roughly the other 13 million Canadian adults who do have wills, we know that roughly 83% are badly outdated. So there's a lot of work to be done. But to your point about not wanting to just kind of wag your finger like, oh, no, you're bad on you. The reality is it's actually not that hard to fix. And what I've been trying to do in my public lectures is to really encourage Canadians to reframe estate planning from being this really kind of sad, dark, morose, even boring subject, and reframe it as something that can be really, and I'm not kidding, fun. And I really put family meetings, which I know we're going to talk about, at the center of that fun process. When we gather our intended beneficiaries, which typically are family, and maybe even charities of our choice, together in one room, pretty amazing things can come out of those conversations. So it's a little bit about, stripping away the fear, getting people confident to get started, to work with their advisors, and not feel like there's they can be intimidated by asking a silly or ill-informed question, right? Really trying to make this subject accessible and fun for families.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because we see this all the time, and I get tired, quite frankly, as a financial advisor, of the guy wagging the finger. Hey, remember that conversation we had 2 years ago? You said you were going to do your will, and I introduced you to that lawyer. Did you ever do anything with that? You have conversations with a lot more people on this probably than I do. What's preventing people from doing this?
Yeah, there's a long laundry list of things that are getting in the way, and I would, quite frankly, I'd put superstition close to the top of that list. I mean, there's some people who think that if they were to talk to their family about writing a will, if they were to go to a lawyer, get one drafted, sign it, hold it, read it, bring it home. God forbid you actually bring a copy of your will home and keep it close to you. There's a lot of people who think if they do that, I don't know, they think immediately they're going to die, like they're preparing themselves for the worst case scenario. Well, the reality is, could you imagine, Scott, if I were to make the argument that people who get a will, sign a will, hold a will, bring it home, actually will extend their life by 10 years? Can you hear how absurd that sounds? I mean, the opposite is equally true. The reality is we need these documents. Number two, aside from superstition, would be just good old-fashioned procrastination. There's a lot of people who think, I don't really want to spend the money to get a will because next year I'm going to sell my business, so I'm just going to wait. Or I don't really want to write a will now because our daughter is expecting our first grandchild's coming along, so we'll just wait for that grandchild to be born. And then they wait for the second and the third, 5 years goes by, 10 years go by. They'll always find another major life event to procrastinate. The reality is there's something called a codicil. It's an easy way, inexpensive way of amending a will. My point to people is don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Like really today is the best day to write a will. If maybe it's a little late now, maybe the offices are closed, but hey, tomorrow morning, if there's one thing people should take away from this call, if they don't have a will or if they want to update it, is simply tomorrow morning, make that call, book an appointment, and just get started. Just get started. And I think that's, people just need a little shove, a little inertia, and then watch what happens when we conquer this fear. So there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of intimidation. Estate planning is full of $1 million words. It's full of Latin and intimidating concepts. And then you get into trusts. In fact, I would argue that trusts are probably the most complicated for most people. And they feel like, I don't know, I just haven't read enough on the subject. I'll get to it next year. They push it off, or they figure they can, I don't know, time it like an oil change. They'll know exactly when they're not feeling well and going to be dying. And then they'll just call a lawyer and make it happen really quick. In fact, there's probably some lawyers right now who are listening. And I can tell you, if they're doing estate planning law, I don't know a single estate planning lawyer who has not been called in the middle of the night to go to a hospital and do a bedside will. And I got to tell you, it is just about the worst place to be itemizing assets, trying to figure out where the cottage is going to go, who's going to get, you know, the art collection, who's going to get the investments, what's fair. Is fair equal? Is equal equal? You got the family members in the hallway popping their head into the hospital room trying to lobby for a particular asset. It is just awful. It is not the place to be doing estate planning. So my message is control the clock. You're feeling well today, you're of clear mind, you've got a good sense of where maybe your assets want to go, or you want to hold a family meeting, which I know we're going to dive into. But, you know, start that process, start collecting, you know, some ideas and best practices, and then sit down and do your best effort. You can always change your will. In fact, in my own family, we change our wills. We're always updating them annually in our family meeting. I know some people will have heard it's very important to update your will every 5 years. I come back the next year. It's, you know, it's not 4 years. It's always 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. We push it off, we procrastinate. Every year on my birthday, I call it my will day. I'm serious. I read my will, not the whole thing. Just there's really one page with a key paragraph that deals with the you know, the division of assets. I just want to make sure that my beneficiaries are still alive, that we haven't had new people born into our family that I would like to share assets with. Like just little, it's really about 5-minute read. It's super quick. And then, yep, check, it's good to go. And then we share those documents in our family. And I know I'm going to get to that, you know, we're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of transparency and how that is really the contrarian idea in willing wisdom, right? There's a lot of people who are approaching estate planning as a kind of a secretive, the more secrets, the more we approach estate planning as a solo endeavor, the better the estate plan. And I really want to deliver a really contrarian message and talk about the dangers and the pitfalls, particularly when it comes to receiving late in life care from people we've kept financial secrets from. So really what I've been trying to do is really unlock the self-interest in estate planning and really let people know that it's not just about answering the question, who gets my stuff when I'm not here. Estate planning is very much about the living, right? We go in for the will and we come out with those two bonus documents, that financial power of attorney and the healthcare directive. It's called different things in different provinces, but that document that will answer the question, you know, do not resuscitate, plug, unplug. We can talk about that, you know, in more detail, but the reality is estate planning is about the living. And I think when people understand that, that's what brings some urgency to this subject. And it's working. There's lots of families now that are starting to have family meetings, getting out in front before there's a health event and making sure these documents are up to date. And more importantly, that they're shared with the people who we're putting in positions to implement these documents. So there's no point in having an executor and then keeping your will secret from these people and then leaving no clue on where this will is or how to access it in the safety deposit box, or not to have a backup executor if you're out of the country or you decline the responsibility. There is a lot of detail that people, when they start to lean on and seek really good counsel, can make really great decisions and leave their family in an extraordinary place. And then my final comment would be, that's what those people are remembered for. They're remembered for how thoughtful they were about their estate plan and how diligent they were and mindful they were that wealth will impact family and family relationships. And so when people die intestate without a will, or they die with badly outdated documents and they leave confusion and tax liability and litigation and broken families fighting over assets, sadly, this is what people are often remembered for, their very last act of indifference.
Yeah, the media is littered with stories, and I always remember Prince dies in an airplane crash, no will. Aretha Franklin dies, no will. You know, and these people have really, really large estates, and the litigation and the fighting and the everything goes on for years and years and years.
And Aretha Franklin had a 4-month diagnosis for pancreatic cancer. She had 4 months to get her affairs in order, and she still died intestate. So there's something that is going on in our culture that is preventing people from moving forward. I mean, we're not talking about sophisticated will. We're talking about the basics, like just basic estate planning. They are ignoring it. And there's lots that's been written on the subject. And one of the other, I think, explanations is something related to family systems theory. It's just an academic branch of study that looks at family as an organization. And the central tenet of family systems theory is that families repeat. We repeat good behaviors, we repeat bad behaviors. So if you look at today's demographic, the baby boomers who are turning 73, 74 this year, they are, in many cases, they're the first generation of significant wealth creators. And guess what? They're thinking back to how their parents did estate planning, and they're approaching it the same way, except their parents didn't have any money. There was no family dispute because there was nothing to fight over. They might have been lucky to have enough money in the estate to pay for the funeral. Like this is the most affluent and successful generation that is retiring. And if they're going to approach estate planning like their parents, we're going to have a big problem in this country, especially when you consider the magnitude of the wealth. As I said, $205 million today, half of it transitioning through the laws of intestacy. That is the provincial formula that will set out who gets the canoe, who gets the barbecue, who gets the investments. And when it comes to cottages and businesses, it's going to thrust, in many cases, siblings into business together as equal business partners. Like, it's crazy. And the complications that could be avoided with simple will, like people reaching out and asking for help with this subject, that is what gets me out of bed doing these public lectures and these seminars all around the world. Quite frankly, all around the world. 127 million American adults without a will. Like, they're no better than us.
It's pretty incredible to contrast that to what's going on in the UK right now and the planning that has gone on in that great wealth transfer. Yeah. And to see when things are planned well, how intergenerationally they can be sustainable for in perpetuity, as long as they've got that planning. Just to your point about good behavior or good planning, family theory repeats itself and bad does not. So kind of interesting to be watching on the sidelines about the monarchy and whatnot. I took away from just to summarize that answer, 3 reasons why people aren't, maybe I missed one, but superstition. But the evidence shows that people that do plan live 10 years longer. So that's out the window from an evidence-based area. Procrastination, and doing it from your hospital bed with days left to live and trying to remember everything is probably the absolute worst situation you can find yourself in. We do have a couple of estate lawyers on the call. I don't know if either of them have ever done that, but it sounds horrible to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one more, and that's cost. You wouldn't want to spend like $2,000 on a will and have everything buttoned down and organized perfectly so that wealth transitions quietly and calmly and predictably. What you would really want to do is go to Staples and get a will kit for $19.95, and then cause such confusion and litigation that you waste hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is crazy how people are trying to cut corners in all the wrong places.
Yeah, I always like to use the hire a professional, right? This goes back to the third thing that you said. If you're afraid of the Latin words and you're afraid of all the terms and the this and the that, and it sounds complicated, hire a professional. Like, I'm not going to do my own teeth. I'm going to hire a dentist to do it, right? Same thing with a lawyer. That's just my opinion. There are some services out there. Brings me to another question, though, is having something better than absolutely nothing?
Oh boy, that's like a trick question, because there are, I have been in airports and I see young couples who are clearly traveling for the first time without their young children. And then like someone gets the bright idea that, oh my God, we don't have a will. And we're hopping on the same plane in about half an hour, and they're scribbling out these handwritten, what are called holographic wills, and they're going to mess it up. They're going to name each other as beneficiaries, and they're going to witness it. They're going to make a mess out of it. So the answer to that question is, you can really mess up something if you don't do it properly. You can cause a lot of extra cost and delay in the administration of your estate if you try to treat it like a do-it-yourself, build your fence on the weekend project.
So from the complicated and procrastination, how long does writing a will take? Like, is this something that's going to take days and days and days? Like,
Well,
to get it done professionally?
Well, it depends on how complex the estate is. If you've got a business and you've got, minority shareholders who are not family, you're going to have to review the shareholder agreement along with the will. Like, there's levels of complexity that will obviously add delay. But, we're not talking about writing a PhD thesis. We're really talking about sitting down with your family. And I really want to talk about that. Like, I really want to talk about the order in which you would go through and answer the big questions, so that when you go to your lawyer, remember, lawyers take instruction, right? They should draft your intentions. So the more work and thought you've given around major decisions, the selection of an executor, backup executor, how you want to divide your assets, particularly complicated and hard to divide assets like businesses and cottages and physical property, the more you can give that thought, the shorter your meetings with lawyers are going to be. And short meetings with lawyers equals
Lower cost. Yeah.
right. So compare that to the person who arrives at a lawyer's office and says, yeah, I read this book, and my advisor, Scott, is fantastic. He said I need a will. So here I am. And so lawyer, what do you think I should do? And the lawyer's like, what? Like, what? So the more work we can do as a family to figure out how we want assets to transition, and that is we could spend an hour on just a tiny piece of that. I said it earlier, is fair equal, or is equal equal? Do I leave the business to Sally and it's worth $1 million, but I'll give $1 million of cash to Johnny? Is that equal, or is that fair? Someone is going to get a tax bill. The one who got the business for free? Yeah, they're going to get a tax bill. The one who got cash, not so much. There's lots to consider. And a lot of families get hung up around fair and equal. It is a real sticky point. A lot of families struggle with the idea of what estate planning is in the first place. Is it really an exercise in providing a quality of outcome so that our children have the same lifestyle? Sally's got an MBA. Johnny is not really a high achiever. So we're going to use our estate plan to raise Johnny's lifestyle up to his sister. Some people approach estate planning that way. And of course, that creates complications. The more families can get together and talk about their challenges and where they're stuck, my central premise is that the answer is always in the room. That every estate plan is, and usually is, very different. Every family is different dynamics. There are different earning powers, even different geography. We just made a major change. Both my parents are still alive. My brother and I were co-executors on their estate. He moved to Indiana. We had to remove him as co-executor so as not to subject my parents' Canadian assets to US estate law. There's a long arm of the IRS. So, there's just a lot of people who don't even know what they don't know around this subject. Yeah. This is why going to Staples and getting the will kit, you do that at your peril. Remember, price is what you pay, value is what you get, especially when it comes to estate planning.
So that cost objection, then you could pay a little bit now, or you could pay a hell of a lot later. Because you don't know what you don't know.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Of all the areas of the law, estate law is constantly evolving. It's jurisdictionally idiosyncratic. So what is going on in BC is very different than Ontario, very different than Alberta.
Everyone knows how devastating and catastrophic and financially ruinous family law, specifically divorce, can be. I heard someone once say, family law is just the warm up for estate law.
Oh yeah, no, it's a dress rehearsal for the really big show.
Yeah.
The big show that's where when you get 4 kids lawyering up, fighting over an asset, look out.
Yeah.
And what's very interesting is, particularly when you get to emotional items, right? People always think it's, it's money. Well, the reality is it can be a piece of art, jewelry, watches, things worn very close to a relative's body that has high emotional connection. Those are the items that often get people whipped up and fighting.
That's Robin Williams' estate. That's what they're fighting over right now, all his memorabilia. You mentioned, I didn't know what you were talking about. So you mentioned something earlier about late in life care and how that relates to wills. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, when we go in for the will, we actually come out of that office with 3 documents, right? That financial power of attorney, that second document, is basically, I'm going to break it down real simple. It basically says, Scott, I bumped my head right now and I'm unconscious. I've actually have a power of attorney who has my document, who will act as if they are me in my best interest. They will pay my bills until I get better. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm on a respirator, with COVID. COVID has been a real reminder. It has really elevated the importance of estate planning. It's not just about dying. Lots of people went on ventilators and actually came off and they were fine. But in the intern, they actually had a financial power of attorney, people who could keep the big wheel turning, running businesses, paying bills. That's just smart planning. That third document is that document that I referred to as a living will, healthcare directive. It's called different things in different provinces, but it's that thing that will help your family avoid playing that game in the hallway of a hospital. Do you know what that game is called? It's a game called Plug Unplug. And all you need is one child to fly in from Ontario who is estranged from that parent and just refuses to unplug because they've got unfinished business with that parent. Funny things happen. When I say funny, I don't mean hilarious. I mean really odd things are happening right now in hospitals 10 minutes from your office. There are families that are struggling with this. Now you tell me, Scott, how someone is going to get the right second or the right minute or the right hour on the right day to unplug their parent. Without this document, without conversation, without any, how are you going to get family members on the same page? Someone is going to feel like they move too slowly or too quickly. The reality is, in our family, I have a copy, as does my brother, of these documents. We are listening to medical professionals who are providing care. We're listening for very specific language, vegetative state, irreversible brain damage, long laundry list of keywords. When we hear it, we'll know exactly what to do. What an amazing non-financial gift our parents have given us to be able to make that decision on their behalf. What an amazing gift they've given themselves. But it's a gift that has not only been made, but communicated and shared in a way that we can act in their best interest. It's amazing and it's simple.
I know you wanted to get into the family meeting, and so do I, because I really like that the most when reading your book. We, as an office, we actually read it together as a book club, and we discussed it. We've all kind of taken it away to our own families. For the benefit of those who haven't read the book yet, and if you do want a copy, we've got information coming up later. Can you please explain why you think family meetings are so important?
Wow, I mean, they're not only so important, they are the most important thing. What I say in the book is that how we give is actually more important than what we give. And I think when people really dig into that idea and start to practice and implement and have these conversations with family members, will they start to piece together how valuable people, the value that they place on the effort. Inherited wealth, look, will do one of two things. It will release potential in the next generation. It will afford that next generation an opportunity to start businesses, fund education, philanthropy, all sorts of really exciting, productive, even fun things. Or inherited wealth will accelerate demise. It won't equivocate. It will do one or the other. And I think when people who create wealth understand that they have a duty, a moral duty and an obligation to understand how their wealth will impact their family and their community, and to probe and explore and then to build estate plans that leave, people in a good place, then I think that is estate plan. That's part of my aspirational message. Listen, I've met someone who inherited $10,000 and they were dead in 30 days because of their addiction. Now, was that the intention of the person who left that gift? I guarantee it wasn't. But that was the outcome. And of course, as an advisor, you know that there are mechanisms, there are things called trusts that we can put in place. Sometimes people with addictions get healthy, right? They get healthy and things can change and gifts can be modified. And that's good planning. But to cavalierly or with great indifference, ignore that potential possibility, I think that can do great damage. And I quite frankly, I would argue that the very wealth of our nation will depend on how this wealth transfer goes. We've worked very hard to create wealth, build businesses, sell businesses. When it comes to the transfer piece, we are woefully lacking in confidence as a nation to do what some old European and even old dynastic American industrial families did. J.D. Rockefeller was an early adopter of family meetings, invested heavily in the preparation of the next generation. He was desperate to avoid the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves arc, right? Make it, maintain it, blow it.
I've read a comparison case study between the Vanderbilts, we all know the name anyways, there's a university, and the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds, of course, famous for having a process for accessing that family money versus the Vanderbilts, who were the rich by way richer than Mayor Rothschild. And now there's not a millionaire amongst them.
Yep.
Pretty incredible story when you have these family conversations. So what does a family meeting actually look like? Like, how does that actually happen?
Well, at the center of the family meeting should be an advisor. And I would really underline this point. I mean, I've been a speaking resource in dozens and dozens and dozens of family meetings. And when I see families lean on their advisor for the first one or two meetings, just till they get some confidence and get used to how these things should work. When they don't treat it like a do-it-yourself project, like without a third party in the room, families can devolve into some weird places. But with a third party in the room, it's remarkable, particularly if there's an agenda and someone taking minutes and bringing some structure and governance to that meeting. It's actually amazing how productive those meetings can be and how you can channel some of that nervous or dysfunctional energy into something really productive. And really trying to find some early successes in those family meetings, right? Like the selection of an executor is, you could have a family meeting with one agenda item, gathering the family to talk openly and honestly about who should be named as the executor. One, all, none, professional, trustee, whatever. The answer, so here's what I believe. The answer is in the room, and it's different for every family. The answer that is right for every family sits in the space between those two people in the relationship. And I think what I'm trying to do is just bridge that gap and arrive at a consensus and bring some transparency to those decision-making, as opposed to people showing up at a funeral home and one child producing a will saying, yeah, mom and dad gave this to me. They didn't want you to know, but I'm the only executor. So here's how it's going to go. So here's how the beginning of the administration of an estate begins, with a surprise and someone excluded as executor, and people are grieving. Here we go again. The courts in Alberta are full of families fighting over the farm. They're fighting over all sorts of assets because it's all wrapped in secrecy.
Couple of questions, couple follow-ups on that. Consensus, you said. I know a lot of families where that's a lot easier said than done.
Oh,
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you strive for consensus. At the end of the day, the person who's contemplating their will obviously has to make a decision. And, you know, there's family dynamics. There's complexity, second marriages, children, half brothers, half siblings. It's tricky, but the trickiness just doesn't go away by ignoring it. All we do is we kick the can down the road and then we die and we're just not here to see it. The reality is, if we do have blended families, they actually have more urgency to have a family meeting to get out in front of this. And it's remarkable how family dynamics can change when a plan is actually developed collaboratively and communicated and drafted and shared. And watching, the siblings of one parent understand that while there'll be some financial consideration for the new wife, she's not going to get everything. In the absence of those family meetings, people just go right to the worst case scenario. They make assumptions, and the relationship is toxic, unnecessarily so, given the fact that there could be a completely different estate planning outcome or objective that can be revealed through a family discussion.
Well, one of the things I talk about is it gives the person the ability, the person who's now passed away, it has afforded them the ability to talk about what they wish and look their family in the eyeballs and say, this is what I want, where the will doesn't really have that ability to do that. It's just a piece of paper with some words on it. And it doesn't have the same impact. One of the things I really liked about the book, because I liked the idea of the family meeting, is I don't know if a family meeting, but you specifically give 7 questions that are really key questions for families to ask themselves. So there's a format, there's a layout, there's a head start to that. You mentioned it would be helpful to have an advisor in the room. I'm just curious, in your experience, who that advisor should be. I'm thinking psychologist right out of the gates, but could it be a lawyer or a trusted,
Absolutely.
accountant, a financial advisor?
Yep, all of the above.
Any
accountant,
close family friend?
Wealth advisors seem to be, I'm not picking favorites here, but frankly, when I'm a speaking resource inside family meetings, it's usually the financial advisor that's bringing me in. And for good reason. Advisors who have multiple generations that they're working with, right? They have this big panoramic view, generational view of how money was created and then how it can be transitioned efficiently by getting input from the lawyer and the accountant. Like, that continuity of advice has proven to be really valuable to families, as opposed to that kind of staccato, mom and dad has an advisor, they die, kids have their own advisor, money leaves the firm. Like, it's just stop, start. Huge lost opportunities to get, a big 50-year view of family wealth, right? And
yeah, that's something that Wealthsimple or Q-Trade just can't replicate and duplicate. These robo advisors that are out there. Crystal, do you want to go to the next slide? I think it's a good time to just say, if people are interested in getting a copy of the book, the Willing Wisdom, or if they're interested in getting a free access code. We didn't really get into it. I'll ask you though, complete your Willing Wisdom Index. What exactly is that? So we got the book. The book gives us this beautiful story of these 3 advisors that are talking together and maybe how to facilitate better conversations and better outcomes. What is this Willing Wisdom Index there? TM.
Yeah, really quickly, it's going to require someone to invest a staggering 8 to 10 minutes of their life. It's a big investment. They're going to invest 10 minutes of their life. And I call it the ultimate estate planning checklist. It's 60 questions that they can answer, totally confidential. No last name required. Use a screen name. Call yourself Elvis. No one cares. Really, this is about good data in, and you're going to get really great recommendations about how you can start to have these conversations with your family so that when you go to see your lawyer, you have a head start. You have a whole bunch of informed questions for your lawyer based on, it's kind of like boot camp for estate planning. So 10 minutes, just answer the question. You're going to get a personalized 20-page report that shows what you're doing well. You're going to get a score out of 100. And then a series of recommendations on how you can close the gap in your estate plan.
Awesome. So Tom was gracious enough to extend a whole bunch of codes for us. I think you normally charge people $200 to complete this.
$199.95.
Yeah. Is that USD? You have 500 Canadian, or is that based on what today was going on? So he's
Yeah.
graciously extended us a bunch of codes that for joining today, we'd love to give to you. Whether you choose to share that with us or not, doesn't matter. Whether you have an advisor that you already work with, we just want to promote getting this stuff done. We think it's going to lead to just better results across the board. I'm going to turn it over to Crystal. I think we've had some questions come in the chat box. And
Yes,
so
we
I'll let
have.
Crystal kind of curate those and maybe turn it over to the audience at this point. Thank you, Tom. That was really, really awesome. I did have one quick question. Last time I heard you speak, you were talking about the oldest will. I thought that story was fascinating. It's, the fender of the tractor in the museum.
Yeah, it's not the oldest will, it's the shortest will.
Oh,
And it's a Cecil Harris, 1943, I believe, Saskatchewan. Sets out on a beautiful sunny day on his tractor, and he's out in the field under the big prairie sky, and life is great until a snap thunderstorm rolls in. The field gets full of muck. His tractor is stuck. He gets off the tractor. He's trying to unstick the tractor. He gets stuck under the wheel, and he's dying. He knows he's dying. He's bleeding out. And he reaches into his pocket. He grabs a penknife, and he carves into the fender of his tractor, "I leave everything to the wife." Now,
Mrs. Harris.
no, he said the wife,
Oh.
which you can actually take a couple of things from that. It kind of begs the question that there were other wives, but that aside, that is pretty remarkable timing for a will. They cut the fender off, submitted it to a probate court, and it was accepted as the shortest will in Canadian history. Well done, Cecil.
So Alinka or Jackie, we have a couple of lawyers there. How would you like to be the lawyer on that estate case?
You know
If there
what?
was a challenge to it.
I'll tell you that I've told that story before. That was actually the case that piqued my interest in estate law back in law school long ago. I think it actually said "all to my wife."
Also, that is
4
right.
words. Yeah.
Anyways, I love that story. I think
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, I love
Don't be Cecil Harris. Don't be scrawling it on the cement,
No.
after you've been hit by a car. Get her done ahead of time. So that's it. I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Awesome. Thank you. We have quite a few questions, actually. Many of them are very specific things, wanting to know more about living wills, personal directives, power of attorneys. Is a living will the same as personal directive? Those are kind of lawyer-ish questions. So I'll let that kind of be, if you want to address that tonight and say if there's a difference or.
Alinka, want to go or should I go?
Yes, so living wills and personal directives are one and the same. We call them personal directives in Alberta. But living wills, I believe, is kind of an Ontario term, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, a living will is actually it's a paragraph or a clause within a personal directive. So your personal directive names the agent, the person who's going to make the decisions on your behalf when you cannot instruct your physician. But the living will is a term within it where you're instructing your agent, the person you've named, what you want done at a time at the end of life matters. And 95% of people say what you said, when we know that if there's no hope of recovery of your faculties, that you want to be unplugged or whatever, if there's more complex terminology for it. But there's about 5% of people out there who say the absolute opposite. But the nice thing about it is it like you said, it relieves guilt. It takes the pressure off the decision maker.
That's awesome. And also,
Just a quick follow-up to that. So one of the things Tom mentioned was complicated. It's complicated. I don't understand these things. Tom, you said you have a list of 20 things that if you're listening for this, but if you're just like me and you don't know these things, is that something that a lawyer helps with? This list of items, like if vegetative state, because I don't know what I don't know, is that going to be discussed?
I can use me as an example. So our questionnaires do have a lot of those in there. And I ask those questions, even stuff like, do you want last rites administered? That can be a big thing for a lot of people. What kind of priest? Is there a particular denomination you're looking for? So yeah, I would go through, and I would assume any estate lawyer would go through those details. Do you want pain medication? I've had clients that have said no, and I'm like, really? You don't want pain medication? So, and then they think about it and they're like, oh, actually, no, I kind of do want pain medication if I'm in excruciating pain. I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense. But yeah.
So it'd be fair to say that you guys going through this process helps actually reduce complexity.
Yeah.
And there was also a question, do you need a lawyer to do the will? I think we did touch on price is what you pay, value is what you receive. If you really care about your situation and your situation involves more than just a bank account, it's probably a great idea to talk to a trusted professional about your documents. Yes, a holographic will, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is legal in Alberta, but there are some ways that it isn't legal. And Michelle is actually with us today, and she can explain from a banking perspective what happens when you don't have your documents in order. Hi, Michelle.
Hello. Yes. So I am a financial planning consultant with Canada Life, but until 4 months ago, I spent the last 10 years as a financial planner with TD Bank and have processed hundreds and hundreds of estates within TD. And because most Canadians have relationships with 3 other banks, all the other major and minor banks pretty much in 10 years. And the banks I've only seen once in 10 years from any of the banks I ever worked with accept a holographic will. I've never seen them accept a will kit. They immediately will send you to the courts if you produce one. The only time I ever saw them accept it, because it was a young man, he was in his 20s and he passed away with $350 in his account. So the bank said, sure, we'll take that holographic will for that $350. They do not accept it in almost any situation. They will ask the families to have it verified, probated, have someone set by the courts. I've only seen them do it once. Again, I no longer represent these people, but I will tell you from my personal experience, that is the only one out of hundreds I have ever seen accepted.
Yeah, and I noticed that you had made a point that probate's required for amounts typically over $75,000 combined. I've actually personally worked with people who have experienced that at smaller amounts.
Yeah.
And probate, I mean, that's not going very quickly right now.
No,
so
correct.
Even between spouses.
Even between spouses, yeah, they are, over that 10 years, they got more and more concerned with litigation against the banks. So they're more and more careful. 75 is an internal number that typically goes to different levels of approval. So that's why I put 75 in there, but they can most definitely ask it for lower amounts, especially if they don't think the will is written correctly. As I noted, if beneficiaries don't exactly match what's in the will, they just won't take the chance that someone will sue them. If they've never met someone at the bank, nobody knows who they are, no one met the person, never heard what their wishes were, that will push them more and more to request a probated will for even smaller amounts. And I put combined because some people think that's a count. If you got 20 grand in your checking account and the rest of your investments add up to 25, they consider all of that for it, even when there's spouses involved. They're very, very careful against litigation for themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate our time together, Michelle, and I really appreciate the stories that you shared with me. So I thought it was helpful to have you here. If anyone has any questions for Michelle, please pop them in the chat, just from a banking perspective or financial planning perspective. She's here to help us make sure that we understand what's important, and that at the end of the day, it's really important that you're confident with the conversations you've had with those that you care about and with the documents that you have, and that you review them regularly. We had some chat saying it's time to update and review our stuff. And I know those people very well, and I feel like it's not even that old. And I was thinking, yeah, it actually is time though. It really is. And it's really hard to make sure we do it. The birthday is a really great tip, Tom, like very helpful. Yeah, and I just want to spend a couple minutes because I don't want to go over time, and I want to be mindful that it's a weeknight. Some of the professionals that many people who have joined us tonight are already working with or already have had some introductions with are Dan McPherson from Elevator Law. He's out in Olds. He has done wills, power of attorneys, personal directives for many people in our office and helped with some tricky situations with probate. Jacqueline, you've already met. She's been on with us tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. Her process is really nice. She helps, we have a questionnaire that we work through with you, kind of like a family meeting. Sometimes people bring their children, sometimes they don't. But we encourage them to involve more people if they can and if it's appropriate. And we work through the questionnaire together so that it doesn't get stuck, tossed in a drawer, ignored. And then Jacqueline's awesome. She drafts something, has a meeting, and you take it from there, and it's been really impactful. We're just on a mission to make sure that every file that we work with has up-to-date documents. And Alinka, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your input and thoughts. We have a long working relationship with Robertson as well, and we really appreciated all of their help. There's also another tool. It's a step up from a will kit. It also is available to you. We have used this in many situations. So 18 and older, in university, just need a document, don't want to see a lawyer yet. We understand that. Or, you know, single person, not a lot going on yet. There's this tool called Willful. We can share some information with you about it. It is a step up from a will kit. It is pretty new. So I have not seen one go through any actual passing, but I'm sure they do have stats on that. We have had people do this from the hospital while they had COVID. That was not my favorite thing. So please do something before something goes wrong, because having to say to really close friends, hey, I know you're really, really sick right now, but you really need to do something, is not the best part of our job. Willful's super ideal. They can do like spouses. They can handle some situations, but they are not appropriate for everyone. So here's a list of what they can't do. Business ownership, wills in different jurisdictions. So if you have property outside of the province that you reside in, you need to make sure that you've addressed that in the province where it exists. And then they are trusted by over 100,000 Canadians. You may have seen them on Dragon's Den. They do have a deal, and they were just on, I think they're on tomorrow night, actually giving an update. So I know that it's getting late. We will stay on for a few minutes. If anyone has questions, we can open it up. Oh, I have a question for Michelle coming in. How does that work with the banks not knowing clients because they are asking clients to use the ATM instead of using tellers face-to-face? That is a great question.
It's a great question. You're exactly correct. That's why the first point I had was they're having less and less people in person in banks. They're having less and less branches. Definitely tellers are usually where people go to, and they get literally almost no training about estates. They can barely process even transactions there. So make an appointment with an advisor at that branch, just so they know who you are. Let them speak to you, let them know what your plans are. Please get your living wills, your power of attorneys done. Get that set up at the bank. Someone who's an advisor with the bank will have much more knowledge. And it's on the forms we fill out when we submit estate processing requests. Do you know this person? Do you have personal knowledge of them? Have you spoken to them about their wishes before? The tellers won't get access to that. You want to make sure you're speaking to an advisor at a branch, but you're correct. There's less and less of them now.
There's even a branch close to my house that has no tellers.
Yep.
And they took them out, and I actually walked in when they reopened, and this little older lady was standing in there just in utter shock. I mean, I wanted to hug her, and I'm not a hugger, for those of you who know me well, but I felt so bad for her.
It's true. I went into a branch for a different bank to process an estate, and they literally had just a row of iPads instead of people, and I went, okay.
I have a question as well, and I don't know who wants to take this one. If you're a part of the family and are not a part of the will, should we be able to get a copy? And I know the answer is that after probate, it typically becomes public. I don't know how to obtain the copy, but if it's not probated yet, is it even possible? And what's the process if it is probated? That's a lawyer question, I think.
Well, and it's a complex one. And it depends if you're part of the family, what part of the family are you? Are you a spouse? Are you an ex-spouse? These are people who should be getting
a child.
Are you a child? Who are you? So it's a bit of a complicated question. Yes, ultimately anyone in the public can see a will. It becomes public record. But in Alberta, we're a little different than other provinces. We don't, the people who must be included are a very narrow list of people who must be included in a will. It's not like BC where we have concepts of moral obligations, and I practiced in Ontario a million years ago, and they have more complex rules about that as well. You can leave a kid out here if they're an adult and they're competent and they can function, and they're not necessarily entitled to the will, but there are certain people you cannot leave out. And so I'm not sure what this person's relationship is within the family.
I'm pretty sure it's a child of parents, yeah, that have passed away.
And is it in Alberta, not in?
It is, yeah.
If you're an adult and you're competent and you're able to financially support yourself, you can't necessarily get a copy until it's probated and part of the public record. But if you believe that something untoward has happened, that somebody's been unduly influenced, you can put a caveat and stop the probate and get involved.
Okay. Yeah, that's very
And
interesting.
you're a person of interest who can get involved.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And then what do you do with employee turnover in advisor positions at the bank, bringing the family in one time a year or just showing pictures? I love this question. I just want to like run in there every year. Hi, we're here.
Also a very valid point. Turnover in banks that's even been in the news is extremely high. So what you want to do, go in, meet with an advisor, an experienced one, have them go over all of the accounts, make sure that they're set up the best possible way for estate planning. An experienced advisor will definitely help you with that. And then, so even if they leave, you know it's set up, do go in regularly, you know, just like your will, update it, chat with someone at the bank. Even if you don't have a particular person, because there is high turnover, once somebody has it set up correctly, it's much easier to do. Bank people put notes on everything they do. So when you come in, they'll let you know they came in, they spoke to me about this, it's in the system. Which is how they kind of deal with turnover issues, but making sure it's set up properly in the first place. And I know it sounds weird in this technical day and age, but yeah, don't be a stranger. Feel free to book appointments to review things with them. And some people do stick around or just move to different locations, but you're not wrong about the turnover. It's very
Michelle, is there potentially a better way of dealing with someone at the bank?
In terms of, honestly, having your account set up properly with everything that Dr. Dean's mentioned already, number one, having a proper will done, making sure your beneficiaries on your accounts and things like that, that's going to be the number one thing. Having a relationship was on the bottom of the list. It's just kind of a helpful little thing to have that may help you speed things along. But having everything set up properly is going to be the most important thing by far. If it's a mess, doesn't matter if you're best friends with the bank manager, no one's going to be able to do anything for you. For those, but don't be shy to ask about estate planning. I think a lot of people don't want to ask their bank about it for many of the reasons Dr. Dean mentioned.
So I think Tom mentioned it earlier, the person that should be in that room is that trusted counselor, that trusted advisor.
Yeah.
And the families that have these massive intergenerational wealth transfers, you know, they've got that family person that they've trusted and dad is trusted and everybody else is trusted. And it always helps, in my opinion, this is a shameless self-promotion, but for that person potentially to own their own business. There's no turnover when you own that business.
Yes,
and I've seen Krista walk a whole bunch of families through some awful situations, and she's by their side in the hospital room, at the courthouse, at the bank, you know, fighting the bank on behalf of the person. So there are alternatives to working with the bank. It doesn't have to be us, but we'd love it to be us. There are amazing financial advisors out there.
Yes, I'm not saying put your money with the bank. If you want to simplify your estate, that's actually probably not the best answer. But just having someone know you. So just for any existing accounts you may have at the bank, I actually recommend consolidating exactly as you mentioned with a trusted advisor who will fight for you and who knows that your accounts are set up properly because they know exactly what you want. They've met your kids. The kids have talked about it with you. That, just like Dr. Dean's mentioned, that's the perfect scenario. The advisor is just going to be someone who, if you do have, you know, a whole bunch of bank accounts or something kicking around there, or the home equity line of credit, whatever it might be, that can be helpful. All the other stuff you mentioned, much, much more valuable.
We had a question there, Crystal. You put up the slide. There's the 7 questions, but we also have another slide coming up with you If you want a copy of the book, let us know. Email us, please. I think you've got that slide coming up. If you want your Willing Wisdom Index code, same thing, let us know.
Yeah.
Scan that if you want to book a meeting with Crystal, the QR code there. I think I've got my people in the way.
Yep. If we want to start a family meeting, we have a template that we have created from the book to help facilitate those meetings. And we have right in front of me here, actually a really great meeting space. If you don't want to do it at home, we have a nice private area and we are really happy to have you here. You can borrow the room or we can sit in the room with you.
And Tom, I mean, Tom has been through this and he's been through selling a business and a family business and not an insignificant one as well. So we've asked or pleaded and he's agreed to come back on November 9th and speak about business transition planning, which I'm super excited about.
This is going to be really fun.
So he'll be back here talking about that. And same thing, if you're interested, the QR code I think is in the corner there. I got all the people in the way. Yes, it is. And you can email us as well to learn more about that. We also have copies of those books. It would be super amazing and helpful if you read that ahead of time, because I think your questions and what you get out of that would just be so much greater. Tom, we really appreciate you taking the time. I know you've just finished a whole day with a bunch of lawyers. That's always trying at the best of times. You're waiting to check out so you can go home and see your family.
Thank you, Tom.
We really, really, really appreciate your time today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to share my message. I really do appreciate it. It's been fun.
And thank you very much to Ilinka and Jackie and Michelle for joining us. I think it's really important that you have a team that helps you. And we are really passionate about a network of people that facilitate your success and meet your goals and help you achieve great things so that you don't have to be distracted and worried about these things. That's our biggest passion. We want to be able to be that little quarterback for you. We don't have to be the loudest one in the room, but we really want to make sure that what the message is from you to all of the professionals who are serving you is the same, so that you aren't running around and trying to figure it all out on your own, because we all end up running out of time eventually. And it doesn't matter if you live to 100 or if you live to 80 or less. We hope you all live a very long and happy life, and that you're not distracted and concerned about these things, and that you know with certainty, no matter what happens tomorrow or later today, that your stuff and everything you've worked for and everyone you care about can celebrate what you've created. That's a really big passion for us. So thank you very much for coming out. I really appreciate it. We have a couple questions we didn't get to, but we will make sure we answer your questions. And thank you, Michelle, for writing that. So thank you very much. And please reach out, book an appointment. We have an online calendar for you. This you can scan and register for the business owner webinar that we will be really excited to welcome Tom back for. So thank you very much. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.